Hello, my friends, and your blondie auditor compliance officer is speaking. And today I would like to discuss about the SOX. Surprise, surprise. And I would like to speak from the different angle. I always would think it was telling that I am a product of the SOX. So I grown up as a professional in the SOX environment. As a compliance professional, this is where my identity grown up, how I built up my foundation, how I learning by doing, getting some certifications, etc., etc. But today I would like to discuss the difference of after having that experience, having that background in the SOX environment, and then moving to the environment which is not under the SOX. And I would start from the perspective that everybody knows, even though those who are not working and never work under the SOX, that it is pretty much rigid. It is pretty much scrutinized. It is very binary. You are either fail or pass. You need to have fulfill the certain requirements. You need to follow up on the certain frameworks, and it is super strict. So I don't think there is anything stricter, even in this, let's say, the financial industries, that something is more stricter than SOX. I don't think it is. I was working in the bank, comparing the banking internal controls, internal audit. There is nothing to do with what is in the SOX. Again, if the SOX works right? So that's a big difference. And of course, having that in mind, that everything should be documented, everything should be evidence based. You have high standard on the IPs. You have a high standard on evidence. And by the way, if you don't know what I'm talking about now, what is the IPs, what is the evidence, check it out. My previous videos about the SOX, and you definitely can find something interesting. So then when you're moving to the, let's say, also publicly traded companies, like here in Denmark, you have locally publicly traded companies, but who are falling under the financial regulation laws of Denmark. Then you can feel physically how the level of scrutiny is lowered out. So the expectations from the internal controls, if I put like this here, the expectations from internal controls on under the SOX, and somewhere here you even don't see the expectations from internal controls from the Danish regulation, like a financial act in English. So you can call it Danish Financial Act. So it's basically kind of SOX for Danish publicly traded companies. And then a little bit the history. Why SOX is so scrutinized? Again, we all know the Enron, we all know the fall and all this lack of the corporate governance, and why why everything appeared, why we got the corporate governance in 2002, why SOX appeared, exactly due to the fact that there was no requirement. There was only requirement and scrutiny under the financial external audit. So basically, while the entire world is since 2002 understood that this is very much important and why it happened, and we had Big Six, Arthur Andersen was eliminated as an audit company. We got to think that in Denmark, it's basically someone invented the time machine and put us into the prior 2002. So I'm not saying that the fraud is happening, but there is a huge probability and possibility of having those. It is the triangle of fraud, right? It is the possibility, that opportunity to commit the fraud. There is no regulation, there is no scrutiny. And of course, with no law, with no pressure, the companies are not getting used to have anything closer to SOX. So therefore, walking into this kind of companies, having this kind of mindset and trying to fit in into the SOX. And again, I lowered out my expectation from the SOX. Of course, I understand that if it is not under the SOX environment, we should not expect people to do something that they shouldn't do. This is not how the good compliance works. But it is super painful, physically painful, to work with non-SOX environment, with the mindset, and I'm talking about Denmark, right? Super relaxed compliance narratives with the SOX background. It would be the same, like, imagine now FIFA is everywhere, right? Everyone is following, even those that who are not into this agenda, everyone is following the FIFA. So imagine that you're a football player, soccer player, and you are, for instance, playing for Barcelona, like, I don't know, like a high rank club, right? And then you are playing in this and you're following the narratives, you have the qualities checks, you have a quality standards in that club. So you're following the dietary, you're following the sleeping, you're following the training, you have a super discipline, because all of this, I'm not saying that all this like a high ranking clubs, they are ideal, but at least they have some requirements which are very important for them because they don't want to jeopardize their image, right? And then with this in mind, so you were playing for season or 2 or 3 or 5 in that kind of environment. You got used, and maybe something you don't like, maybe there is a lot of discipline, maybe there are a lot of controls, maybe there are a lot of scrutiny, but you got used to that environment. It became somehow your routine. It became something that could look like, right? And then, for example, you're moving to some regional, local club, any country, right? And of course, then you see a lot of differences, that there is no menu, there is no cook chef who is following your on the menu, there is no list of the, let's say, the trainings that you need to fulfill, there is no like a schedule, or it's super flexible schedule, or there is no person who is following up on your routine, or there is no assigned person who is checking and everything and fixing into the journal, logging every your like height, weight, etc., etc. There is, because they are under budgeted and they're doing it quite more relaxed. So for them, okay, play is play. And I'm not saying it's worse or better. I'm just explaining. I'm just saying. And then you can spot the difference. And then you're realizing that the scrutiny that you had somehow created some kind of discipline, the some environment, some governance, some awareness, and somehow build it up you as a player. And then not having it, you're somehow feeling, first of all, as an alien, and second of all, even if you try to onboard all your peers and talk to your trainer, talk to your coach and saying, okay, maybe we can do this and that, then they would say, oh no, there is no requirement, why should we do this, why should we spend money for this, why we should do this. You are overestimating, like you are super tough, you are trying to scrutinize a bureaucratic thing, and etc., etc. And of course, maybe you would like it this kind of relaxed way, but you never would be in the league. My point is, in this relaxed environment, you can get used to this. You can even maybe enjoy that relaxed environment, less scrutiny, this mindset. But then the point is, like, you can never go back to that league. Losing that maturity, that sense of, understanding what good look like, you would never go back to the league. Coming back to SOX, because I was trying to, put a frame, put a line between these two. It is, for me, it's another league. And that's we can, we can hate, like or dislike the SOX, and we could always blame and say, oh, it's over exaggerated, it's like a bureaucratic. Yes, I agree, SOX is really not catching up with the technological, this digital transformation, AI. They are really not catching up, but that's always like this. I don't think that any compliance regulation is catching up. Countries are not catching up with the, like, production cycle is not catching up with the technology, because the speed is higher. Of course, I know it, and it's absolutely valid, it's absolutely truth. But I do believe that for me this is a golden standard, and I can have this kind of corridor where I can, balance and say, okay, I can drop my expectation, I can lower them down, or I can go to the best in class, but I would never go down like this. And that's what happened to me when I started working for non-SOX environment. I lowered out myself as a professional. The point is, like, you always would be looking like as if you are super arrogant, you don't want to be more business oriented, because and it's a valid point from those companies, because they're not expecting you to be like this. There are no expectations from them to follow some kind of requirements, but you do have some expectations, and you look how good look, and you cannot allow yourself to go and play in that local league, because you want to stay closer to the higher league, even though maybe you would never go back. But it is nicer to your heart to feel that you are still in line, you are still catching up, with those requirements that make you who you are. And that's how I feel about the SOX. And maybe you guys also have the experience where you had to lower down completely your expectations. And for instance, I would be very, very open and ready to work for some kind of startups and see, okay, how it is there. I'm pretty sure there is zero governance. But for me, if the company is becoming a bit more matured, there is need, it makes sense to have the corporate governance. And the corporate governance is the corporate governance. It cannot be like a couple, like a different shadows of corporate governance. So it cannot be like that, okay, we don't have segregation of duties because there is no requirement for this, but we want to have a, I don't know, banking controls, and that's why we are good. So there are like minimum basic things that, as I said, like there is a corridor that I can, move around and say, okay, I can lower down my expectations. Maybe it shouldn't be full ITGC, full ITAC, full APE, but we need to have the, at least the most important segregation of duties, something like this. So if you face the same issue, for instance, where you had to compromise yourself coming from that high league to the local market, so maybe you were happy. I tried it a couple of times. I was not happy. So that's why I would be very, very glad to, I am glad to come back to the SOX side. So be on the SOX side is better. So see you around, and leave me some notes and comments if you have anything to add or you have any questions. I would be very glad to read them and reply, or maybe even reply via the video. See you around, guys. Bye.